Hello everyone, welcome to Beyond the Gates CBS spoilers. Revealed at the center of everything unfolding right now is Anita Dupree. And what makes the story suffocating isn't simply the word cancer itself, but the chain reaction it triggers in that no one in the family has had time to prepare for, or the strength to absorb. A diagnosis of triple-negative breast cancer isn't the kind of bad news that can be wrapped in a few comforting sentences and then set aside for later. It's a cold announcement that Anita's life has shifted into a different rhythm. A rhythm that knocks every habit, every plan, every familiar role she has carried in her family off its track. For Anita, the shock isn't only fear for her own body, but the loss of control being forced into the center of everyone's worry. When she has spent her entire life being the one who steadies everyone else, she has always stood firm, always kept the house from tilting, always made sure the storms outside Fairmont Crest could not reach the people she loves. But this time the storm is inside her, silent, unpredictable, and impossible to negotiate with. Vernon feels the exact moment the family is yanked away from normal life. He is not a man who shows fear easily, but this fear clings to him with a persistence that won't loosen. Like background noise he can't shut off. He tries to stay calm, tries to be a pillar, tries to hold his composure the way he always has in every Dupree crisis. Yet inside him one question repeats without mercy: if he cannot protect Anita from this, what can he protect her from at all? His steadiness becomes armor he cannot take off, and the longer he wears it, the heavier it gets, until it feels like it is crushing his ribs. Sometimes his eyes linger on Anita a second too long, as if he is memorizing the smallest details of her face, her gestures, her breathing, just in case the future forces him to live on memory alone. And he hates himself for even thinking that, because the moment he admits it, even briefly, his entire world threatens to collapse. Nicole and Donnie spiral into a different kind of panic, more complicated because it blends love, guilt, and the deeply human, deeply shameful instinct to cling to whatever makes the pain feel smaller. Nicole tries to stay rational. She tries to turn the crisis into decisions, steps, the right choices, as if careful logic can reduce terror. But the words triple-negative breast cancer force her to confront the truth that some things cannot be managed through intellect or planning. What destabilizes her is not only the thought of Anita growing weaker, but the realization that for the first time in her life she is seeing her mother as someone who might actually fall. The strength Nicole has leaned on forever suddenly shows a crack, and that crack frightens her more than anything else. Donnie reacts with heat, because Donnie has always carried fire in her bones and a need to do anything, avoid feeling helpless. Her anger is not only aimed at the world, but at fate, at unfairness, at the question of why it had to be her mother, and even at herself. Because some part of Donnie believes she has spent too long battling her own wars to notice how much her mother has been carrying in silence. Donnie can insist she is strong, can force herself to stand tall. But deep down she fears the moment she watches Anita weaken will break her in half. She fears she will lose control, make everything worse, say the wrong thing, turn pain into an explosion that burns the entire family down. And because she fears that, she clings even harder to her toughness, as if hardness is the only life raft she has. In the middle of that emotional chaos, the conversation about BRCA genetic testing arrives like a necessary and brutal turn. It is not just a medical procedure, it is a reminder that Anita's illness may not end with Anita. It may cast long shadows over inheritance, risk, and the future of Nicole and Donnie, suggesting that something dangerous could have been waiting quietly in their bloodline. For a long time, that thought weighs on Anita like stone. She is already drowning in the shock of her own diagnosis. Yet what truly steals her sleep is the question of whether she might have unknowingly passed a threat down to her daughters. She does not speak that fear outright, but it lives in her eyes, in the way her silence stretches, in the way she looks at Nicole and Donnie like two children she still wants to shield from every toxin life can offer. And when Anita learns that Nicole and Donnie are considering BRCA testing, her guilt does not ease. It sharpens back as she knows her daughters are walking into a confrontation no one ever wants. Hi guy, welcome back Beyond the Gates CBS spoilers. Nicole and Donnie are not only confronting illness, they are confronting themselves. BRCA testing is like a door, open it, and you might see the truth, but you might also see a future shaped by risk. Nicole fears a result that will destroy the sense of safety she has built with reason. Donnie fears a result that will turn their lives into yet another war, and she is no longer sure she has the strength to fight endlessly. In that fragile, trembling space, both women lean on old loves, not because it is noble, but because it is human. When the present becomes too heavy, people reach for the places that once made them feel understood, protected, or at least listened to without judgment. Yet even that choice makes them feel worse. because they cannot tell whether they are seeking comfort or running away from the room, where Anita is absorbing everyone's fear. Nicole hates needing support outside the family because it feels like betrayal of Dupree unity. Donnie hates her own vulnerability because she has always believed vulnerability is something others can exploit. And in that very conflict, they become more likely to react emotionally, to lose their footing, to let the air in the house tighten until it feels like a wire ready to snap. Anita, meanwhile, is trapped between two realities. One is the hospital reality, procedures, schedules, clinical vocabulary stripped of emotion, and the silent authority of people who measure her body in numbers and timelines. The other is the family reality, every gaze pointed toward her, every sentence softened with care but still carrying the same message. Is standing at the edge of something enormous. What drains Anita is not only the fear of treatment, but the fact that she must be both patient and mother at the same time. At the hospital, she is forced to accept weakness, pain, intrusion, the humiliation of being examined and managed. At home, she still tries to hold the image of the unbreakable mother, still tries to smile, still tries to soothe Nicole and Donnie, still tries to speak in ways that make them less afraid. But the harder she tries, the more exhausted she becomes. Because every time she pretends she is fine, she feels like she is lying to the people she loves. And Anita despises that feeling, being forced to choose between truth and her daughter's peace of mind. Her worries multiply during her hospital treatment. There are moments when her entire life feels reduced to bright, cold hallways, footsteps, short conversations about timing, and the unbearable weight of waiting. Waiting can be more frightening than pain because it gives the imagination too much room to run. Anita pictures worst-case endings, then punishes herself for daring to picture them at all. She thinks of Vernon and the way he stands beside her like an anchor. His calm so determined it almost looks like defiance. She thinks of Nicole and Donnie trying to be brave while slowly fraying at the edges. She thinks of the looming BRCA conversation as another wave about to crash. And she wishes she could carry everything for them. But life does not allow that. Life forces her to face the truth that love cannot erase risk. Love can only hold you upright when risk becomes reality. And just when Anita believes she has already reached the worst of it, just when she thinks the most terrifying thing has a clear shape, a name, something doctors can plan against, another shock arrives with no warning. An unexpected visit from an old friend. It is the kind of moment that makes the heart drop. Not because the visitor has done anything wrong yet, but because the past always carries power. An old friend is never just a familiar face. It is a key that can unlock rooms Anita has kept sealed for years. It is the scent of memory, a rope that yanks her back to a time when she may have been fragile, when she may have made mistakes, when she may have chosen things she never wanted her present family to know. The meeting turns tense quickly, and that tension is terrifying precisely because it does not require shouting or open conflict. It lives in the way the atmosphere shifts, in the way Anita's body tightens on instinct, as if trying to protect what little strength she has left. It lives in the way Vernon senses something is wrong without being told. In the way Nicole and Donnie may not hear a word yet still feel their home has just been placed on a different kind of scale. Why now? Why when Anita is already weak, already forced to focus on survival? Is this a visit of career, a visit of consequence? Is it an apology or a reminder of a debt? In Anita's mind the questions stampede. And the faster they come, the more she fears the answers. Because if this is one of the women from the Articulates, then Anita's past is not only glitter and nostalgia. It may be fractures, rivalries, secrets, and unspoken agreements known only to them. If it is Sharon or Tracy, the possibilities multiply in ways Anita is not ready to face. Perhaps they carry an old story that was never resolved. Perhaps they carry a truth that was buried for a reason. Perhaps they have come simply to remind Anita that parts of her life were never fully shared with Vernon or her daughters. But there is another possibility that makes Anita's blood turn cold. That it is not anyone from the old group at all, but someone completely unexpected. Someone whose presence alone makes Anita understand that cancer is not the only threat closing in on her life. Vernon wants to step in to shield Anita, to drive the danger away from her hospital room and her fragile body. Yet he also understands there are wounds from Anita's past he cannot touch unless she allows it. Nicole and Donnie, outside the immediate circle of the encounter, feel the wrongness like a cold draft through the house. They have prepared themselves for chemotherapy, for BRCA testing, for long hospital days. But they have not prepared themselves for the possibility that their mother's past could suddenly become part of the battle. And that is what makes the tension most explosive. This is not something that can be diagnosed by medicine, solved by a treatment plan, or contained by sheer Dupree strength. Anita tells herself she must be strong. She tells herself cancer is already enough she cannot afford to break because of an unexpected visit. But the harder she forces herself to hold steady, the clearer it becomes that she is standing on a thin line between endurance and collapse. She sees Nicole and Donnie clinging to each other and to old loves, grasping for anything that keeps them from falling into panic. She sees Vernon trying to hold the family together like a man bracing a building before the wind tears it apart. And she understands that if she crumbles under the weight of her past now, the family will not only be fighting cancer, they will be fighting a fracture of trust. Yet sometimes people do not fall because of pain. Sometimes they fall because someone touches the exact place they have spent years hiding. The tension in the meeting stretches time itself. No one needs to raise their voice. The visitor's presence is enough to make the room feel starved of air. Anita catches herself trying to read the other person's intent, trying to predict their next move, as if survival depends on it. And the cruel part is that the act of predicting pulls her back into an older version of herself and Anita from years ago. A woman trained to smile under pressure. A woman who learned how to perform composure while fear screamed inside her. But Anita now is weaker, exhausted, unable to play that role with the same perfection. Nicole and Donnie face a quiet but agonizing choice: step into the room to protect their mother, or stay out and respect whatever Anita never wanted to share. They are split between the right to defend her and Anita's right to keep something private. And that split does more than strain them, it forces a question they never wanted to ask. Do they truly know their mother? Is this illness the first crack? Or simply the last force strong enough to push other buried truths to the surface? Are they preparing for BRCA testing to understand the future, or unknowingly opening a door for the past to flood in? Anita sees those small fractures forming and fear rises in her throat. She fears the illness will steal her strength. But she fears even more that the illness will become the opening through which unresolved parts of her life stab into the family she has tried so hard to keep intact. She wants to stop time. She wants to ask life for one clean breath. But life does not answer. Life only places a new trial in front of her: fight cancer while protecting her family from a shadow walking back through the door. And just when Anita thinks she has steadied her breathing, just when she tells herself this encounter will pass like a gust of cold air, she notices a small detail that freezes her completely. The familiarity in the old friend's eyes does not look like simple concern. It looks like someone weighing something they hold, deciding when to release it. Anita does not need to hear words to understand what that means. This is not just a visit. It is a test of her endurance, a test of Vernon's stability, and a test of Nicole and Donnie's trust. At the very moment the Duprees are closest to the edge, the air thickens, as if the entire room is waiting for one sentence that will change everything. Anita locks her gaze onto that face, forcing her eyes not to tremble, forcing her fear not to show. But inside her, only one question remains. Loud as an alarm: did this person come to save her, or to destroy the last part of her life she has kept unbroken? And as the door closes behind them and the hallway noise fades, Anita understands the most terrifying thing is not the unexpected visit itself, but the feeling that if this person speaks one name from the articulates out loud, all of Fairmont Crest will hear the sound of a secret cracking at the exact moment. The Dupree family can least survive another fracture. Vanessa didn't go to Joey to be soothed, and she certainly didn't go to collect pretty promises. She went because there are days when a person suddenly realizes life can be rerouted by a single fragment of information, one sentence overheard, one detail dropped carelessly, one truth that everyone assumed was far away. The bad news reached Vanessa that way, quiet and unannounced, yet violent enough to hollow out her chest in an instant. At first, she tried to convince herself she was overreacting, that this could still be a misunderstanding, an incomplete story, something that would make sense once she had all the pieces. But the more she forced herself into reason, the more she felt what was spreading inside her wasn't confusion at all. It was fear with a very specific shape, the fear that her future and the futures of people she loved were being tightened by an invisible thread, and if she didn't act now, everything would slip beyond her reach forever. What frightened her most wasn't the information itself, but the way it detonated a chain of thoughts she could not stop. Vanessa heard something devastating, and her mind immediately began building worst-case scenarios, as if the human brain tries to brace for pain by imagining it before it arrives. She thought of young eyes, of lives still unfinished, of names she refused to let become numbers in a medical report. She thought of Anita, the woman everyone in Fairmont Crest knew as a pillar, as proof that strength could be inherited and sustained. If even Anita could be knocked down by a diagnosis, then no one was truly safe. Vanessa understood that kind of terror too well. The moment a door opens and what stands behind it isn't a scandal or a power play, but a truth that can force an entire family to stare at its own bloodline with dread. She went to Joey because he was the kind of man who could turn fear into motion. Vanessa had seen it in him over and over. Joey didn't like standing still. He could be reckless, dangerous, the sort of person others measured with caution. But he rarely allowed a problem to exist without trying to control it. And on that day, Vanessa needed exactly that control, even though she understood the price attached. Because when Joey loved someone, his love was never only emotion. It always carried the shadow of power, of possession, of debts remembered. Vanessa knew she was stepping into Joey's territorial place, where kindness usually came with conditions, but she stepped in anyway. Because sometimes people accept the risk of owing a debt in exchange for the chance to save what they're afraid of losing. Joey had already expressed his love for Vanessa, and that confession should have been tender. A warm anchor in a life that was often chaotic and sharp-edged. But the bad news warped everything. It turned his love into something that was both comforting and terrifying. Because Vanessa suddenly realized that if she used Joey's feelings to ask for something vital, she would also be allowing that love to move deeper into her life, to occupy a space that would be almost impossible to reclaim later. Vanessa wasn't naive. She understood Joey wouldn't say "I love you" and then walk away, leaving her to cope alone. He would want to fix it, arrange it, become the only person she could name when panic hit. And that was exactly what made Vanessa want to cling to him and recoil at the same time. The bad news cracked her in the quietest way. Not the kind of collapse that comes with loud sobbing, but the kind where a person stands still and everything around them blurs, until all they can hear is their own heartbeat and one relentless question: what if this is real? What if this involves the twins? What if everything she believed had been protected, sealed safely away, was actually sitting inside a danger zone? And then another possibility rose, terrifying in a different way. What if the bad news didn't start with the twins at all, but with Anita? What if Vanessa learned about Anita's diagnosis through the people closest to her, Donnie or Nicole? If that was true, then this wasn't simply a tragic story about one woman fighting illness. It was an alarm for anyone who shared blood, and for children growing up under the shadow of a genetic risk they never asked to inherit. Vanessa didn't need every medical term to understand what genetic meant. Just imagining Donnie and Nicole having to be tested and beyond them, their children potentially having to face risk, was enough to make Vanessa's throat tighten. A discovery like that could rip peace out of any household, because it forces people to do the cruelest thing: look at the future and ask what they might lose, instead of trusting they still have time. Vanessa felt as if she were standing in front of a mirror that didn't reflect her face, but a line of generations, and in that reflection fear spread like ink. That was why Vanessa's request to Joey could never be casual. It had to be serious, urgent. The kind of request that would pull them both into a new orbit if Joey agreed. She arrived in front of him both desperate and ashamed, because she didn't want to be the woman who only runs to him when life is attacking her. But she also had no other choice. She needed Joey to help her keep the pieces inside her mind from collapsing. She needed him to do what she couldn't do in that moment: turn panic into a plan, turn terror into direction, so she wouldn't drown in the violence of her own imagination. Joey looked at Vanessa the way he looked at someone he wanted to hold in, someone he wanted to claim. His love wasn't a poetic vow, it was instinct, possession dressed in real feeling. He saw her on the edge of breaking, and something dangerous awakened in him. If some piece of information was destroying her, he would find it, touch it, and handle it in his own way. But Vanessa knew Joey's way could travel far beyond what anyone called normal. And that was the deepest conflict inside her. She needed him, but she feared him too. She wanted protection, but she feared that protection would become a cage. The tension sharpened because Vanessa couldn't reveal everything smoothly, and Joey wasn't the type to wait patiently while she organized her emotions. Vanessa stood on a line between two painful choices: tell him the whole truth, and let Joey enter the deepest part of her fear, or hold something back to keep her last fragment of control at the cost of suffering alone. While the questions kept gnawing in her mind, Donnie and Nicole appeared like women already struggling under Anita's diagnosis. And Vanessa knew that if the conversation about testing, risk, and inheritance spread, all of Fairmont Crest would shake in a way no previous scandal ever had. This time it wouldn't be about reputation or power. It would be about survival turning uncertain. Vanessa wanted to believe that if she went to the right person, there would be a way out. But bad news like this couldn't be handled like a social crisis. It clung to the heart, clung to family, clung to every name. And her request, the still unspoken, hung in the air like a desperate plea. Joey had to help her protect the people she loved from a truth closing in. Anyway, anything. As long as she didn't have to stand there helpless while the future fell apart in front of her. When Vanessa finally faced Joey, her fear was no longer just a wave inside her, it had become a decision. She wasn't there to ask if he loved her because he already had. She was there to test whether that love could carry something horrifying, or whether it was only a beautiful promise in a world where truth was always more brutal than romance. And as Joey stepped closer, his gaze darkening in a way that told Vanessa he was ready to agree, ready to turn her request into a debt she could never repay. Vanessa realized the most frightening part wasn't the news she had just learned. It was the fact that she was about to say it out loud to Joey at the exact moment. Her eyes caught something on his desk, small but chilling, as if Joey had known before she arrived and had been preparing for this for far longer than she could ever imagine. A sign that this bad news wasn't random at all, and that her request might be the spark for a war she wasn't ready to enter. The Beyond the Gates CBS Spoilers channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the series from the perspective of a longtime fan. This allows viewers to gain deeper, more objective, and interesting insights. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the series.